Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business in life with a purpose, serving others and achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created the show for you because we want everyone to learn how to do business and life to make an impact in the world. I want you to think about how you're going to serve today or tomorrow and what's that impact you're going to make. And I always end with what impact is. My guest today has made an impact in my favorite industry, sports, and he's using that to really impact people in his world. Schwartzen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. Blessed to be here.
Schwarzenegger, love that little tagline. It's great because you're really just going out there making changes and helping people and making an impact. How much has sports been around that for you?
The majority, I would say 80% of my life up to the age of about 20 years old. 80% of my life. And because, I grew up in a neighborhood where, sports was glorified, but it was hip hop was glorified. And so it was either one or the other. It was either, I do a little spoken word. It was either you were sweet with the mic or you were sweet with the rock. You either, handled the mic or you handled the rock. It was one of those. You didn't want to be another sheep in the flock. And so I was nice with the rock. And so, just a little background. I'm a New Yorker, so through and through. And so for me, basketball was that ticket for me to get out the neighborhood so that I can provide something for myself in the future. I had no vision for myself outside of the game of basketball, outside of sports.
Your neighborhood wasn't really good from what I remember our first conversation.
Yeah, no, I was born in Brooklyn. My mom had me in Brooklyn. I was raised in the Bronx on the Boogie Down. And eventually I got moved because of foster care from the Bronx, New York at 8 years old to Staten Island. And in Staten Island, I was, just new to the area. And so I had to make a name for myself. I was 8, my brother was 9. He was really good at basketball and I took kind of after him. And so we just played in the local neighborhood on basketball a whole lot. And yeah, it was, drug dealers going on, gang influence. I grew up in this group home kind of system where you kind of just, had to watch your back, you couldn't be punked. And so in order for me to make a name for myself throughout middle school and pretty much high school, basketball was that thing that kept me away from the streets, from the gangs, from the violence, from the weapons, from the deviant behavior that, just inner city kids kind of just gravitate towards because that's what we see on TV.
Yeah. Yeah. What tip would you give somebody that's growing up in that neighborhood right now to help them?
Yeah, and I do this. Why I went into business was why God allowed me to launch my first business of Be Your Own Hero. First one is to make a conscious decision, right? Not so many times when we're just thrown into life or we're just going with the flow, going with what our friends go through. The first conscious decision I think I made was at 14. It came kind of late. At 8, 9, 10, within those early primitive years of child development, kind of doing what your parents say. You have to, go to grade, go get good grades in school, listen to what the teacher says, all of that. My first conscious decision for me was when my back was against the wall at 14 years old, when I ran away from my group home and I was with the gang members and, my foster father told me I couldn't join the basketball team. He took away this vision that I had for myself. And so that conscious decision came in front of a court judge. And in front of that court judge, it was time for me to either face 2 years 2 years in a juvenile detention hall because, I was running the streets with gangs. I robbed the teacher, threatened to blow up, schools and things like that. I was, menace to society is what they call it. And then it was this foster father was given the option of take him home and give him 1 year's probation, but he goes back to your group home and he's your problem. And at that moment, I could have, again, went back home, by the grace of God. I was met with grace, and I'm eternally grateful for that. I could have went back to the street homies, you only a stone's throw away from drug dealers around the neighborhood, where I grew up at. And so it was either go back there or do my 1 year's probation, go to curfew, and then, eventually just play basketball. And I used that opportunity to contact the high school coach as a freshman and sophomore in high school, and go to this basketball team, be a team member, be a team player, and learn the principles of what it's like to be on a team. And, I had the skill, but I didn't have the character to stay on the team, which was like go to school, not just good grades, but go to practice on time. When you miss practice, you got to call a coach. Why are you missing practice? Are you skipping practice because you want to go flirt with girls? Why are you not skipping, why you're not in class when you're skipping, skipping class because you want to flirt with girls. And that was my issue. It was mostly you with girls or go to practice. And eventually I just went to practice.
Yeah. And I didn't grow up in this neighborhood, so I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you talking about that. But my first thought is, with all
Mm-hmm.
this you endured in the foster system, how'd you keep your hope?
Because I had multiple foster homes, not every situation was the same. And so my first foster home in the Bronx, it was a single mother with her 3 children who were over the age of 16. One of them was a brother who I called my big brother. And so when I transferred from there to another foster home where it was completely hopeless, where you learn the street code, you don't snitch, you toughen up, you don't cry, you learn this unspoken this unspoken codes in this street life. If there's weed in the house, you don't tell on nobody. You just man up. You macho up at 8 years old. I mean, that was you man up. You don't cry. Slapped in the face, you get pain. You chuck it up. Chuck it up. Put your shoulders back. A very militant man, a style is leadership. And so I was introduced to that. And so I hoped. I mean, in my mind, I just hoped I would go back to my old foster home. When that hope never came, that's where I had to believe that I had to do something. Again, from 8 to 14, I was in this limbo of, do I go with the streets? How do I brace myself for the gangs and things like that? How do I fight? How do I carry a weapon? Would I kill somebody? Would I sell drugs? All while being influenced by these gang members who are punching out cop windows, bringing police home and things like that. Drugs being around, passed around the 8x8 room that I lived in. It was 4 foster kids in one room. I'm looking at my older brother who's like, for lack of better words, he's just quiet. He's being obedient to the male authority in the house. And I'm rebellious. I'm like, before I was the youngest kid in the house, now I'm the middle child. And so all this confusion. And so eventually I took this hope in my own hands. Before I was, I wasn't a follower of God and of the creator of Jesus. At that time, I was like, I got to do something. My pride kind of got to take me to this direction where I think it's the right thing. And eventually I did. And, at 14 years old, I was kind of getting a little bigger. I was starting to mature a little bit. My reproduction organs was working, things like that. I started thinking about for myself. So at 14 years old, I finally did run away. And again, by the grace of God, through that action of running away from a foster home that was very abusive, manipulative, just not uncaring, emotionless, prideful, sexual assault was going on, all these things happening. I just took that one chance and I left, and I never went back, and I ran the streets for like 2.5 weeks till eventually I got caught. I got caught by trying to get back into school because I was like, I can't be a dumb idiot trying to, go to college eventually, And so I took that hope and by God's grace, again, it set me on a path. Where the rest of my high school years, the only thing that I was deviant in was just talking to girls during class time. And so for the first 14 years, it was that survival instinct, that survival mentality, and I broke out of that through the grace of God at 14 when I was able to run away from home.
You teach leader. I love the story. I mean, I love that you're here because it could have been a whole different story. You wouldn't be sitting here. And thanks you for being transparent and showing it. You teach leadership. That's a big part of your life. How did this story and how did any mentors during that time help you grow your leadership?
Yeah, I know we live today in a world of influencers, right? Social media influencers and things like that. Back then, the word influencer wasn't as big, like mid 2000s. Let me say that back then, or 2010s and things like that. And so when I gravitated towards a positive role model like my coach, he was the first maybe Black male I saw that wasn't like into drugs. He wasn't into, he wasn't too prideful. He was a opening to whole nother world of mine. And that same opening happened when I met my youth pastor, who happened to be a young Black male in his 20s as well. And so those two influences was like, oh, okay. Like, I don't just see like just these alpha males who try to control on TV, or my foster father or the gang members at home in the group home. And I'm like, yo, there's something about these men that I kind of gravitate towards. And so that level of influence influenced me, where it was like, they believe in me, and I think that's a huge thing, to have a mentor, an influencer, believe in them, believe in a kid who doesn't believe in themselves. And that's why I started Hero Leadership Group, to let you know that there's a level of belief that I have that I want to bring to the next generation, that I have to bring to the next young man who looks like me, or the young lady who looks like me, or going through something similar in a way that makes them feel, again, what we call hopeless, that makes them feel like they can't do anything, that makes them feel like they don't have a choice because they're growing up in an environment that takes their voice away. And so when I felt like they believed in me, it gave me the power to believe in myself, and now have a voice to do the things that I'm doing now.
Love the sports and faith bridge of two mentors, the two industries that can be so powerful. But what I love what you're saying is you listened and you took action. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And that's what part of leadership is. Let me ask you, what does servant leadership look like to you, and what are the characteristics?
I never was introduced to the word servanthood or servant leadership until college. Until I went to a pretty much almost a Lutheran college up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and they talking about the servant leadership hood. I took a class on on leadership, and they talked about servant. And I was like, how are you a servant if you lead? It's very, very confusing part to my life, to be honest. And it wasn't until I read the story of Christ, of seeing how he led, but he served, right? He washed his disciples' feet. Again, I don't want to be too religious, but this is how I was introduced to it. And I thought leaders, led, just told people what to do, influence. But when I was introduced to I was a residential advisor, I was a Black Student Union president, I was the student government president. How do I lead? How do I now do this in a way that's outside the basketball court? And how do I do that where it's authentic, where I'm not just doing it because I'm asked to do that. I'm doing this because I'm called to do that. There's a big difference. And I had to go to my faith. I had to go step into how Christ led, and saw how he, humbled himself. And it's a form of humility that the world doesn't understand. And that's why I look at servanthood. It's a form of humility where you're not looking lower at yourself or down upon yourself, but you take this lowly position in order to act for the greater good of someone else. It's about sacrifice. So if you put servant in that, you have to entertain the word sacrifice as well, where it's like you're giving something up in order to do something else for the greater good of someone else, with expecting nothing in return. That's how I look at servanthood.
That's such a great answer. And what's interesting is those two gentlemen, the coach and the pastor, were servant leaders. You didn't know it till you got into college. Now you're a servant leader and you're mentoring others. How are you doing that?
I do that every day. I'm a coach right now. I'm a trainer, basketball trainer. And I contact, again, I contact my, my kids, not just on the basketball court when I'm training them, outside the basketball court. I make sure, something that, again, doing something without expecting something in return, right? I give them cupcakes for their birthdays. Every single child in my group, I coach 10 to 14 right now. They get cupcakes. I don't get nothing in return and things like that. But I know for me, I wasn't celebrated as a kid. I missed so many birthdays because I was always in punishment. I told my fiance now, it's Christmas time and things like that. The reason why I'm so good at wrapping presents, I didn't get any for Christmas, and so I had to wrap everyone else's. And I know what it's like to feel like you're useless, regardless if you average 25 points a game or you average no points. You are seen. This coach, right? Coach S is what they call me, Schwarzenegger. We'll let them know that they're seen, and we will celebrate them every chance I get. And I can't do that in every facet of my life, but in that particular ministry, in my basketball ministry, that's when I was like, okay, this is for them. Let you know, it don't matter if your skill level is Michael Jordan or your last person off the bench. You matter here. I see you, and we're going to celebrate you regardless of what's going on in your personal life. On this court, we're going to take some time to celebrate you.
It's a beautiful message, Schwarzen. And it's crazy because you mentioned Jesus, you're mentoring. But let's talk about the purpose and belief behind human suffering. Jesus suffered, people that follow faith, we know that. We just passed his, birth, and we'll jump in here in March in his death and rebirth, resurrection. What's your thoughts on human suffering and your belief on that?
Yeah, that can be very tricky. It's a vast, it's a spectrum of pain, right? One of my keynotes as a keynote speaker is called "From Pain to Purpose," right? I think it does take pain is so vast, right? Because it's the first thing when we experience pain is we usually internalize things, and for me it was asking the question, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me specifically? And then when you hold it in, you think you're the only person that goes through that form of pain, right? And then that's when it becomes prideful. Like, I'm a victim now. You begin to take on this mentality like, woe was me, bad things that happen to me. Again, I'm a person who experienced like motherlessness. That's a very small percentage of people who experience motherlessness who aren't in prison right now at 29 years old,
Yeah.
who are fatherless, who are in prison right now, who experience that. And so for me, a pain for me after seeing Christ, seeing the cross, right? Like the amulet of Christianity is the cross, something that was so painful back then for the Roman Empire. He used that to bring himself glory, right? To bring glory to that. Now we worship the cross in a lot of ways because of how he used that pain for a greater purpose and used it as a public spectacle to shame the enemy. Not to get into theology or anything, but for me, I use that same thing. My greatest pain in life was not having parents. My greatest purpose in life is to impact individuals who may feel alone or may not feel like they have a voice. Or I look at my greatest blessing is my greatest curse. My greatest blessing, my greatest curse is that I didn't have parents. My greatest blessing is that I didn't have parents, because now I have this freedom to acknowledge God as my ultimate authority, and he protected me every step of the way. And that would be the encouragement I give to people who go through pain. Ask the questions. He's not afraid of them. God is not afraid of our pain and our circumstances. Even if you think you're the only person who has gone through that, like sexual assault is a huge one that I went through. And I talk from my experience with that when it comes to being 2 years, assaulted and being taken advantage of and feeling useless and things like that. Like, that's why I say pain can be majority. Or to the person who feels upset because they failed the math test because they got a B and their parents expected an A. They still feel low, and the severity of it might not be the same, but to them, that means the world. They disappointed their parents. They did disappoint them. And that goes a long way. And so I speak to each and every, I've been doing this a long time. So I kind of can pull a lot of different experiences in order to meet people where they are, to let them know there's a greater pain to that purpose. Let's just use that pain to fuel to our greater purpose, which could be anyone's, what we call reason or why.
Yeah, I love that you said multiple different pains.
Mm-hmm.
We all have pain.
Mm-hmm.
The audience, you think about, we've had pain in our life. And you said the severity is different. I didn't live in that neighborhood, but I had a pain of, my family wanted me to play pro football. I never got big enough to do it. But when I lost the game, I felt pain. That you too, everybody in sports, you get that thing in your gut, like, oh man, if I'd done this.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying about the different severities. It all can be handled the same way. Just some are tougher than others. You got an interesting name. When I first met you, Schwartzen and Schwarzenegger, talk about the trajectory, how your name came about.
Yeah, that was the number one when I finally did meet my biological mother after 25 years. That was the first thing I asked. I went through this life about this name. Kids, when I was younger, when I was living in the Bronx, everybody called me Arnold because they knew my name was Schwarzenegger, right? And I didn't know the origin of it. I just know she named me. That was the thing that went through the grapevine. So I'm going through this life. One foster family took the name away, and they only called me Schwartz and only called me Schwarzen. They never used Schwarzenegger. And then when I got older, I'm like, no, my name is Schwarzenegger. And so when I asked her about it, she said, I called on the phone. I finally found her. She said, she's, thick Haitian. She was a Haitian woman. She is a Haitian woman, Haitian accent. She was like, oh, the reason why your name is because when I migrated here from Haiti, I was pregnant. And I was watching this strong man on TV. And I didn't know I was pregnant, but I was pregnant with you. And every time he came on TV, she said she was watching the Commando. She said she feel her belly kick. And so she was like, oh, that's going to be my Schwarzenegger. And so she named me after the strong man, Arnold Schwarzenegger, on TV, this bodybuilding man. And she felt me in her belly. And she knew she was pregnant because every time she was on TV, I would kick in her stomach. And so she wanted to name me after that.
I love that story. I knew it was a great story. It's better than I even thought. Yeah. And what's interesting, Schwarzenegger, is your strength and faith is as strong as Arnold Schwarzenegger was when he was lifting weights. And that's what I love. And you take into your business what you do. Somebody goes to you, somebody goes in your same type of background. I know you're in Oakland, California now. Somebody comes up to you, a kid, and says, Schwarzenegger, I want to be a leader like you. I want to be a servant leader. How would you coach them?
I would ask questions. Why do you want to be a servant leader? What attracts you to servant leadership? What skills do you? I would so many questions come to mind when it comes to it. I'm not trying to be Mr. Miyagi, but I am definitely trying to be a little bit Mr. Miyagi a little bit, you know, when it comes to taking on the next generation of kids. And sometimes instead of putting into them like education, right? I'm in the field of education. I work with the Boys and Girls Club. Education is all about drawing out, right? You know, the root word for education is about educare, you know, educure in some ways. I will pull out what they already have on the inside. What have you been doing up until this point for you to desire servant leadership? What does servanthood mean to you? And then I will give them some books. And if they're serious, again, I'm not, you know, especially if I'm, you know, mentorship for free and all that, and it's one-on-one, I would make them do a little bit of homework, you know, some accountability. You know, read this book. Let me know what you think about the book of Proverbs. You know, even if you're not a believer, Proverbs is an incredible book to just get wisdom and insight. Look, what you get from it? Let's talk through this before I just give you the nuggets and the tools that, you know, is going to put you in position to really understand what it means to lead with a servant's heart. You know, and so I would again draw that, and then, you know, depending on the age, I would get to know their background immediately. You know, what's your parents like? Things like I ask a whole bunch of questions. I do, and then we will go from there. After I ask the questions, kind of see where they're at, so I can get to know who they are instead of, again, a lot of kids these days, you know, waste times of video games. What are they doing on their free time? Again, like I played pro ball for a long time, right? People say, oh, they would kill to be in your position. Well, if they would kill to be in their position, they had the same time I had at 15 years old, right? You know, at 15, 16, 17, 18, all those years that I put in the gym, if they really wanted to do it, they would have. You know, the secrets is out there. Kobe has so many secrets on YouTube. I just studied his philosophy and all of that. And I use that same thing and I applied it to my life. And so the secrets are out there. You know, the secrets to success are out there to get to this level. Connections, you just, you know, it's a, you know, dime a dozen. You just got to figure out, you know, who meet and all that. But ultimately, I would, you know, just suggest them to see what I know about them.
I love that you said that. And I'm going to tell you this, and audience, this is what's really important. Schwarzenegger is maybe special or not, but what's more important, you special because you took action. The Kobe videos, you studied, you practiced, you desire was strong. And you're absolutely right. Michael Jordan says that. Anybody could have done what I did, but I just worked harder than everybody else. I studied harder than everybody else. I had a great group around me, and I became what I became.
Right.
And that's what you're doing, and I really appreciate that. We're running out of time, but I've got a question that came in my head during this show. If a parent came to you and said, I really, you know, I don't want my kid to play sports, give me a reason why they should play sports.
Well, what are they doing?
Let's say let's use basketball as that's your expertise.
No, that'd be the question.
I got you. Okay, you're asking me. Okay, it's basketball. Let's play a.
I would ask what are they? So if they don't want them to play, I would ask the parent, what are they doing right now? What is going to help? What do you see for their vision? What is their vision for themselves? And depending on their age, I think at around 14, around that teenage years, they need to develop a sense of thought for self. You have to, because eventually you're going to go to college, and guess what? In college, you have to think to yourself. Otherwise, you can get caught for plagiarism. You got to think for yourself. And at that 13, that's why that 13-year-old mark, it's a key point to their development when it comes to the teenage years. Rapid brain development, puberty happens, distractions come, they want to be cool, you know, body starts changing. So I asked them, so what plan do you have for them? What is their plan for their life? What is their desire? What are their interests? I gauged it. This is the same tools I use for Hero Leadership Group. I gauge what is it that they desire? What are they passionate about? What brings them alive? If you didn't have an alarm, what will wake you up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do what you need to do without getting paid, without getting compensated? What exactly would you be doing at that time at 6 o'clock in the morning that would bring you so much joy that you feel like you were created for a bigger purpose? And I would start from there and go, because that's what happened with me. I didn't have no alarm for years, and I had mentors like virtual mentors, Dr. Eric Thomas and Inky Johnson, these guys who talk so passionately about things that I related to. Yeah. And so at that point, I'm like, I need to start waking up. My passion needs to wake me. God needs to wake me up. I need to be waking up before the alarm gets up. And that's where, like, again, the avenue speaks about greatness, and then, you know, talk about higher levels of success, talk about their steps to success. You know, can you read a book at 4 o'clock in the morning that no one's there just to study your craft, just so you can be somewhere at 7 o'clock in the, you know, these putting in the time, the law of time. And it's so much that you can give a parent. So I would have to start with where they are. What is your child's future look like for you? What does their future look like for them? And then I'll say, well, the reason why I do sports is because of A, B, and C. It took me out from here. It brought me here. And now I'm here. I was a trainer, a student of the game. I became an expert of the game. Now I teach the game. See how that can correlate? I can kind of, play in that way. This is where I was. This is where I was, where I am now. This is where I'm going as well. And so I would then engage and then tell my story about how I overcame obstacles throughout the process of becoming a pro, but not just to sign one contract one time. I did it over 6 years, several times. Kept going, and eventually I transitioned into coaching and training.
Yeah, that's a great answer. One of the best I've ever heard. And I want to tell the audience that goes for a band member, a cheerleader. I'm a sports guy, and of course Schwarzenegger's a sports guy. That's what we lean into. But this works with all that. Be with a group of kids and be an adult. And I love that. Learn to be an adult, because you will someday, like you said. And that's where I think people struggle in college. This has been incredible, Schwarzenegger. I thank you so much for your time. How can people reach out to you?
They can, my Instagram mostly. I'm mostly on there to reach the younger generation, but also my website for those who are in the professional field. And my website is exactly what it says, heroleadershipgroup.com. My Instagram is schwartzen.priscil. And my YouTube, you just type in Schwartzen Priscil, and all my videos and motivational speeches will be on there, my spoken word pieces, and more than welcome to reach out to me.
All right. We'll have all that in the show notes so you have access to it. Thanks again, Schwarzenegger. I love this. I'm going to bring you back. We've got a lot more to talk about with leadership. And I want to thank you all for listening. I want to remind you, my TV show, Together We Serve, will be launching on January 5th. Keep an eye out that on Apple TV. And I want to thank all of you for listening to the show, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.